Tonight, it's worse than we knew. Today, families searched among hundreds of dead. We have new casualty numbers from the crackdown in Egypt. Charlie D'Agata is there.
And that was the last time you saw her?
Yeah, we didn't know it was going to be the last time.
The president retaliated today. Major Garrett and Juan Zarate look at what's at stake for the United States. Important evidence is recovered from the jet crash in Alabama. Manuel Bojorquez reports. Police fired 116 shots into this car. Was the driver an innocent man? Mark Strassman investigates. And ex-cons often return to prison unless they meet the bee lady. Don Daler on how honey can end a life of crime.
Makes me feel like a good father, good person.
This is the CBS Evening News with Scott Pelley.
Good evening. With the death toll mounting in Egypt, so too is worldwide condemnation of the brutal crackdown on supporters of President Mohammed Morsi, who was ousted last month in a military coup. There were mass funerals today. The military rulers behind the crackdown said 638 have been killed since yesterday, with thousands hurt. But the toll could be much higher, as evidenced by the hundreds of bodies lined up at a Cairo mosque. Burned out buildings speak to the destruction left by yesterday's battles. Charlie D'Agata begins our coverage tonight in Cairo. Charlie?
Scott, tonight Egypt is under lockdown, not only under a state of emergency, but under a nighttime curfew. And today the interim government announced that police can use lethal force to protect themselves and state institutions. And this comes at a time when people are in shock over yesterday's attack. Inside the Al Imam Mosque today, we saw the human face of the suffering caused by yesterday's brutal crackdown. There were rows and rows of bodies wrapped in shrouds. They were covered in bags of ice to keep them from decomposing in the stifling heat. People sprayed air freshener in a futile attempt to combat the stench of decay.
All day long, there's been a steady stream of bodies leaving this mosque and frantic relatives arriving, hoping to find their loved ones and bring them out for burial.
But for many, the nightmare wasn't over.
This is Amir.
This is Amir.
Ahmed Badir came to Egypt from his home in Tampa, Florida, to attend a family wedding this week. His brother lives in Cairo. He took a break from the demonstrations he was taking part in to go too.
He got a chance to see the whole family, and he said goodbye to all of us.
And that was the last time you saw her?
Yeah, we didn't know it was going to be the last time.
The father of two young girls was among the protesters. Early this morning, Ahmed came to the mosque and saw he was also among the victims.
It was too emotional. He was too young to die.
He said when he tried to take his brother home, he faced another outrage from the government.
When you came to retrieve your brother's body, what did they tell you?
They said if you want to take the body now, you have to sign the document. You have to agree that this was a natural death.
Natural death?
He died of natural causes. That's what it would say on the death certificate. When there's an obvious gunshot wound to his neck.
He's not alone. Others in the mosque complained about the same thing.
My brother's number here at this makeshift morgue is 261. I know at least there's 261 bodies here that are dead. Some of them are charred. Some of them are children. When you see that, it's so overwhelming. I've never seen so much death.
Now, we're getting late reports tonight, Scott, that mosque has come under siege from security forces, first using tear gas, then live ammunition. It must be said we're getting this information from the Muslim Brotherhood, supporters of ousted President Mohammed Morsi.
Charlie D'Agata with our team in Cairo. Charlie, thanks very much. President Obama retaliated against the Egyptian generals today by canceling joint military exercises that the U.S. holds with Egypt every 2 years. But Mr. Obama did not suspend the more than $1 billion in military aid that the U.S. gives Egypt each year. On vacation in Martha's Vineyard, Mr. Obama had this to say.
We deplore violence against civilians. We support universal rights essential to human dignity, including the right to peaceful protest. We oppose the pursuit of martial law, which denies those rights to citizens under the principle that security trumps individual freedom, or that might makes right. And today, the United States extends its condolences to the families of those who were killed and those who were wounded.
So, what is at stake? We're bringing in Juan Zarate, a deputy national security advisor in the George W. Bush administration. He's now our senior national security analyst, and Major Garrett, our chief White House correspondent. Major, what did the administration do to try to head this off?
Scott, behind the scenes, the administration proposed at least 2 diplomatic options, and it sent Deputy Secretary of State Bill Burns to Cairo to deliver them, and it asked Republican Senators John McCain and Lindsey Graham to back them up. One called for Morsi to return to power briefly, resign, and then set a political reconciliation process in motion. The other called for the Egyptian military to find alternative representatives within Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood movement through which they could pursue a political compromise. When those efforts failed, Scott, up to the last minute, administration officials urged Egyptian military to use restraint, but to no avail.
Juan, what's at stake for the United States?
Scott, Egypt is the most populous and influential Arab country. Often it's said, as Egypt goes, so goes the Arab world. It's also a cornerstone of stability in the region, the peace treaty with Israel, security of the Suez Canal and the Sinai. It's also a key U.S. ally on issues like Syria, Iran, and terrorism. And so what happens in Egypt matters to the United States.
Juan, when the coup happened last month, the Obama administration did not condemn it. Did that serve to encourage the military?
It could have, Scott. I think the administration didn't want to tie its hands. It wanted to maintain flexibility, the ability to continue funding the military, to have some leverage on what happened in Egypt and on the decision-making. The problem is it may have appeared to have been a sacrifice of our laws and principles for the sake of stability.
And Major, what's next? The president's options seem pretty limited.
Well, the president, Scott, could suspend some or all of that estimated $1 billion in annual U.S. aid to Egypt. He could also discourage international lending and foreign investment in Egypt. What's clear, Scott, is the calibrated attempt the administration has had to redirect Egyptian policy has failed, and the president's patience is wearing thin. One top official told me today, and these are his words, "We cannot sustain a relationship with Egypt if these actions continue."
Major Garrett, Juan Zarate, thank you. In Beirut today, a deadly car bombing is the latest sign that Syria's civil war is spreading to its neighbors. At least 18 people were killed. Dozens more were trapped in burning buildings. The neighborhood targeted is a stronghold of the militant group Hezbollah. The bombing is seen as payback for Hezbollah's support of the Syrian dictator, Bashar al-Assad. Investigators on the scene of the UPS cargo plane crash in Alabama have now recovered the flight recorders. The Airbus A300 crashed yesterday while attempting to land in Birmingham, killing the 2 pilots. Manuel Bojorquez is on the scene.
The cases that protect the data recorders were badly charred from the explosion and fire. The impact was so great and debris fields so large, an FBI evidence team is helping collect wreckage in backyards and on streets. Robert Sumwalt is with the NTSB.
The preliminary evidence indicates no evidence of an uncontained engine failure. There's no evidence of a pre-impact fire.
It was just before 5 a.m. when the Airbus A300 made its final approach to Birmingham International. The jet descended nearly 7,000 feet in just 1 minute before striking trees and slamming into the hills a half-mile from runway 18. Former Delta pilot Kevin Hyatt has landed there many times. He told us a steep descent is not uncommon, but compares an early morning approach to runway 18 to flying through a black hole.
You're coming in over a hillside area that's fairly dark, and you may lose some of your spatial orientation as you're flying into there, and you're relying more on your instruments at the time.
The NTSB has not said how experienced the 2 pilots were with the approach to that runway. Scott, investigators will review the activities of those pilots in the 72 hours prior to the crash to determine whether fatigue may have been a factor.
Manuel, thank you. In about 7 weeks, Americans can start buying health insurance on those new exchanges that are part of the Affordable Care Act. Today, the Obama administration announced $67 million in awards to more than 100 organizations that will help people understand their options. As Ben Tracy tells us, the key to the success of what the president himself now calls Obamacare is getting young folks to sign up.
Jordan Zavaleta is what the healthcare industry calls a young invincible. He's 26 and has no health insurance, largely because it's expensive to buy on his own and he rarely gets sick.
In the past couple years that I've been living on my own, I've seen the doctor once. I want to be active. I want to do all these things that could potentially get me very hurt. And if that happens, I'd like to be safe and be covered.
An estimated 19 million young adults under the age of 34 do not have health insurance. By 2014, Americans are mandated to have coverage or will have to pay a $95 fine or 1% of their income. Many will qualify for subsidized insurance through new healthcare exchanges created by Obamacare.
When young people have that option, they get it, they'll get insured. We just have to do the work.
Tamika Butler is the California director for Young Invincibles, a group helping young adults get coverage.
Why is there so much focus on getting young people into this new system?
When young people are insured, it's going to bring down the cost for everybody because we're relatively healthy. In order to make this law successful, we really need everyone to get insured.
The government's goal is to enroll 7 million Americans in the exchanges by next spring. For the system to work, about 2.7 million of them need to be young adults. They help offset the costs of older, generally less healthy people. Jordan Zavaleta's insurance through the exchange will cost him less than $200 per month.
I just paid off my student loans, and that was $200 a month. So
there's your health insurance money.
So now that will be health insurance.
He plans to sign up when enrollment begins on October 1st. Ben Tracy, CBS News, Los Angeles.
There's news today of a big improvement in the employment picture. The government reported today that 320,000 people put in their first claims for unemployment insurance last week. But that is 15,000 fewer than the week before, and it is the lowest number since the start of the Great Recession. Good economic news like that worries Wall Street. They think the Federal Reserve might end its stimulus program. So today the Dow plunged 225 points to close at 15,112. There are new allegations of a police cover-up in a fatal shooting in Miami Beach. And researchers have discovered a new species hiding in plain sight. When the CBS Evening News continues. We have new details tonight in the case of Hannah Anderson, the 16-year-old California girl who was kidnapped by a family friend. Detectives say the suspect, James DiMaggio, tortured Anderson's mother and 8-year-old brother before killing them. They also revealed that DiMaggio and Hannah Anderson exchanged 13 phone calls before those murders. Anderson was rescued in Idaho by FBI agents who shot DiMaggio to death. New questions are being raised about a shooting in which the police in Miami Beach killed a 22-year-old man. Mark Strassman now on allegations of a police cover-up.
A mostly black crowd was leaving Miami Beach's annual hip-hop festival. It was 4 a.m. Memorial Day weekend 2011.
There's a vehicle fleeing southbound, I'm calling.
Police say this blue Hyundai, seen in video recorded by a resident in a high-rise, had hit a police officer on a bike 3 blocks away. It rolled to a stop for a minute when police opened fire. A dozen officers fired 116 rounds. 22-year-old Raymond Harris hit 16 times, died behind the wheel. 4 bystanders were also wounded, including Carlson, St. Louis.
You go there for fun, next thing you know, you're getting shot, you hear gunshots, and then you're crawling somewhere. That's not what I expected to happen that night.
At first, police said Harris had shot at them. But 3 days passed before investigators said they recovered a gun under the Hyundai's front seat. Tests showed Harris never fired it, and police have not presented any evidence that an officer was hit by Harris's car. His blood alcohol level was over the legal limit.
They say he was driving on the wrong side of the street. The tape doesn't show that. They say he was driving recklessly. The tape doesn't show that.
Lawyer Marwan Porter represents Haris's family.
He was shot down in cold blood. This doesn't pass the smell test.
Some witnesses say police confiscated cell phones from people who had taken videos of the shooting and the aftermath. Charlene Haris is the dead man's sister.
It's been over 2 years until today. We still have not heard from the police officers. They attacked my brother and now they're attacking our family. They need to be held responsible. They need to take accountability for their actions.
Police investigators won't say whether they've even questioned the 12 officers involved in the shooting. Haris's family had to sue Miami Beach to release evidence in the case. Miami Beach police declined our request for an interview. They did refer us to the mayor's office, and in a statement the mayor said the investigation prevents making formal statements, but the city has been diligently working on enhancing policies and procedures throughout the organization to restore the public trust.
We want some kind of closure. We want to understand what happened and why they use such force.
State prosecutors are now reviewing the case and will decide whether to charge any of the officers. Mark Strassman, CBS News, Miami.
Did the defending champion cheat during warm-ups for the America's Cup? That's coming next. The America's Cup has been hit with a cheating scandal. Defending champion Oracle USA has admitted it modified its boats without permission during a warm-up race last year. Oracle has forfeited its trophies and is waiting to hear whether it will face further punishment in the America's Cup final next month. Oracle USA is owned by software billionaire Larry Ellison. The Boston Marathon bombing was 4 months ago today, and 2 of the youngest victims were from the Richard family. 8-year-old Martin was killed. 7-year-old Jane lost her leg. Well, today the family put out this photo of Jane walking on her new prosthetic leg. In a blog post, they write that she is a source of inspiration and exhaustion. The loss of her leg apparently has not slowed her down. This was a real treat in the newsroom today. Scientists at the Smithsonian announced the discovery of a new species of mammal. It's called an olinguito, and you can find it jumping from tree to tree in the forests of Ecuador and Colombia. Turns out you could have found one back in the 1970s at the National Zoo in Washington. Problem was she was misidentified at that time as a member of a sister species, an olingo, which explains why they could never get her to mate with other olingos. Guess they just didn't speak the same olingo. And that will bring us to the bees and what bees do to help folks turn their lives around. That story is next. Man has no better friend than honeybees. They pollinate 1/3 of our food crops, so they help sustain human life. And for some folks who really need it, honeybees provide a second chance at life. From Chicago, here's Don Daler.
When you're convicted of a crime in this country, your chances of future employment are cut in half. Amir Futrell knows that firsthand. What did you do to get in trouble?
Controlled substance.
Specifically?
Cocaine.
Cocaine?
Yes, sir.
You got busted for selling?
Yes, sir.
What kind of time did you do?
6 years.
When Futrell got out of prison, he had 2 kids to support and no job prospects.
I didn't want to revert to what brought me into the penitentiary. So, I was looking for a new way. You have to try something different, and this was it.
We strain it and then we jar it.
He found Brenda Palms Barber and her bees. She hires former inmates and turns them into beekeepers.
These are people who had served time for crimes, but could not get back into the labor market because of their backgrounds.
Palms Barber helps them gain work experience so that they can start building a resume.
Oh, you guys have great smiles.
As she builds an unlikely business on the mean streets of Chicago.
There are lots of weeds on the west side, and there are weeds that produce nectar. And in fact, they produce some beautiful, delicious honey as well.
There's a metaphor in there somewhere.
Well, absolutely there is. It isn't about what we see as a flower or a weed. It's just drawing the good out of that plant source and transforming it into something that is sweet and good.
In 2005, Sweet Beginnings began with $140,000 in seed money from the Illinois Department of Corrections. It now sells honey and skincare products under the name of Bee Love in supermarkets, hotels, and airports. The company expects sales of $300,000 this year. But Palms Barber measures success differently. Nationally, 40% of inmates return to prison. Only 4% of her workers do.
It makes me feel great. Makes me feel like a, like a good father, good person.
You give them wings.
Oh, yeah, I guess so. We hope so. And the thing is, they have the wings. They just need that support, so they can take flight.
That's a business model Brenda Palms Barber hopes to pollinate across the country. Don Daler, CBS News, Chicago.
And that's the CBS Evening News for tonight. For all of us at CBS News all around the world, good night.